I started the link. Hallo, benvenuti, buongiorno, bienvenue, guten Mittag. Ich freue mich sehr. I'm really glad to open this science afternoon. We will talk today in English without interpretation. We are really glad to have our finalists from Pre-Media Newcomer with us, Simone Pengue and Chloé Carrière. And our further guests are Fanny Georgi, a virologist from the University of Zurich, who is today in charge of academic promotions at the Dean's Office of the Department of Natural Sciences, and Stefanie Schniedrig, a science journalist at Keystone SDA, who is the youngest member of the board of the Swiss Association of Science Journalism. SDI is the Keystone SDI is the news agency spreading the news to all small and large newspapers, and it's the place to be and to select news which comes also to local journals, radios, and televisions. And now let's ask our panel who they are. Simone Pengue, let's start with you. Can you tell us more about your aspirations in research and science journalism?
Hi, thank you. Well, in science, terms of science, my aspiration is to continue my PhD in biophysics and to hopefully finish it successfully. While in science journalism, of course, I would like to somehow not simply communicate science in terms of educational content to the public, but more aiming at a sort of science culture. I come from Ticino, so it's a linguistic minority in Switzerland, and therefore my goal is to somehow manage to communicate also with the rest of Switzerland, and hopefully at this point also abroad, because there is a huge amount of people, scientists or educated people in Switzerland and abroad actually speaking in English. So I think that this would be a bit my journalistic goal.
Thank you very much. Now, Chloé Carrière, who are you? Also a physicist when you finished your bachelor's degree, but what are you doing now?
Thanks, Claudia, Simone. So yes, my name is Chloe, and I'm also known as Galactic Chloe, and I'm a master's student at EPFL. I did my bachelor in physics and wanting to be an astrophysicist, but now leaning more towards management of technologies. And as Simone, I'm passionate about science communication and science journalism because I'm passionate about space and sciences, but also sharing it with the public. And this is why I really see myself continuing in this field, hopefully finding a place where I can do both, being a manager in the space field and also continuing being a science communicator.
Thanks a lot. Then let's talk to Fanny Georgi. You made this step from research in virology, and now you are at the Dean's office, and you more or less prepare the files for academic promotion. Is that true?
It's a big part of the job, but it's also looking at strategic improvements to the process. Where does the faculty want to go? What are the values that we want to develop, and how can we get there? So it's really about moving science forward, which is a big part of my motivation for this job.
Will we see more female researchers at the University of Zurich Natural Science Department because of your work?
Not just because of my work. Of course, it's a team effort and it's about the spirit of the entire faculty. But yeah, we're making great progress.
Thanks a lot for your engagement. Then Stefanie Schniedrich, can you tell us more about your work at SDA Keystone?
Yeah, so at Keystone SDA, we spread science news all across Switzerland, I would say. So we select news from publications, from press releases, and try to find out what is interesting for the public. And in that way, so we make sure that science is present in all newspapers, also in small newspapers which can't afford science editors for themselves.
What is today's science news?
Sorry?
Did you already write some? What is today's science news? Did you already write an article?
Yes, I did. So I wrote something about sleep, that if you listen to nice words when you're sleeping, that you can sleep better. Yes, and I had a lot of science news today. I don't remember all anymore because we write a lot of science news. I would say 2 to 4 each day. So it's really a lot of science news. I can't remember each of them anymore.
So we are really grateful that even in small newspapers we can read science news because they are among your clients. We discussed it lately and we thought it's about 200 clients all over Switzerland in 3 languages which can get your news. And now let's go to Chloe and Simone. They made a special contribution for the pre-media newcomer and the public voting where everybody of you can give their vote started on Monday. And maybe you can tell us what is special about your contribution, Simone. Oh, no, I wanted to start with Chloe because I really try to be fair. We heard Simone first. Chloe, what is special about your contribution?
Thanks, Claudia. So maybe first to describe a bit more what we contributed. It's a special episode of a YouTube channel, which is called the Galactic Chloe Show, which aims at creating a new format of communicating science. So we're really at the crossroads between a science show, but a late night show from America, for instance. So we try to discover not only the science, but the people that do the science. And for this contribution, we made a special episode with 2 incredible guests, Professor Michel Mayor, who won the Nobel Prize of Physics in 2019, and the only Swiss astronaut, Claude Nicollier, who actually did their studies in physics at the same time. And what is special is for me that with this format, we try not only to address the content. Exoplanets, it's largely done in science communication, and we hear about it a lot. But we also try to show who is doing this work and why. I don't know about you, but how I got into science is talking with someone that was working in the space field. And what really impressed me was not only the facts and the space mission itself, it was also the meaning that the scientists give to his research. And this is how we want to inspire the young generation with the Galactic Chloe Show. And we hope that this episode in particular will inspire many more people.
Thanks a lot. Chloe made a trailer and we will look it together for 1 minute. Yes, we saw that technically it's lagging a little bit because of Zoom. You will also have the possibility to have a look at it live. But let's share the screen, Chloe.
Yes. So the trailer is in French, but it's also available the English subtitles on YouTube.
Une exoplanète, c'est simplement une planète qui tourne autour d'une autre étoile.
Bonjour Claude, bonjour Michel.
Bonjour Chloé. D'abord, je vais commencer par la chose la plus importante. Ici, c'est qu'on a fait une partie de nos études ensemble.
Bon, j'ai pas souvent l'occasion de me retrouver entourée d'un astronaute et d'un prix Nobel.
J'étais tellement content que Michel, avec Didier Queloz, ait pu faire cette découverte fondamentale dans la première exoplanète autour d'une étoile du type solaire.
Oui, on va essayer de répondre à cette question fabuleuse, fondamentale. Est-ce que la vie existe ailleurs dans l'univers?
Bon, dans le système solaire, on pourrait trouver des formes de vie, c'est pas du tout exclu. On cherche d'ailleurs, que ce soit sur Mars.
Ne fuyez pas, nous sommes vos amis.
I'm very sorry, I need to stop the trailer here. It's 15 more seconds, but to be fair with Simone, it has to be 1 minute.
Great, thanks a lot. So there is some tension open for the end of this trailer, and everybody is free to have a look after this broadcast. Now we go to Simone Pengue. Simone Pengue, what is special about your contribution?
Yeah, thanks. So first thing, what kind of contribution did we make? It's a documentary, actually. So we tried to follow a bit of cinematic style and use this cinematic storytelling as a way to tell science. And as I was mentioning earlier, it's not just a matter of educating people, so explaining them whatever natural phenomena we have around us, but in a similar fashion to what Chloe just said, somehow showing some behind the scene of science. And in this case, it's not as much focusing on the people, as Chloe just said, but more focusing on the people that scientists as people meet every day in the lab while they do their work. And this is a bit, I would say, the fil rouge of my science communication. In this case, we wanted to talk about data recycling and the life cycle of data. It started very autobiographically, so basically from my own life. We were told to store our data in some servers, and this data to make it accessible to everyone in the world. I started wondering, okay, but who's actually using it? How does it work? Is it really possible? Who the hell is going to access my data that I'm producing today in my lab? Why? What are the problems that this person could meet? And also in an historical perspective, what is going to happen to this data maybe in 100 years from now? And this is where I really started thinking about this idea. It was a couple of years ago, actually. And then it happened a few months ago. There was this interesting point of my own research about the dynamics of proteins. Well, I realized that there were some variables, some physical quantities that I was not interested in primarily, that I was not going to do some paper about, but actually was there. I realized that in my data, there was a correlation, there was a trend that was not able to use for anything. Why? Because I did not have a question to answer to. And therefore, I thought, okay, someone sooner or later will maybe access this data, hopefully, but how does it actually work? And this is where I started building the entire story that is visible in the documentary. So this is a bit a special thing in a sense, the story and the style also. We tried to do something that was a bit more catchy for younger generations.
Great, thank you for this introduction. And can we have also the trailer from Simone Pengue?
Ogni giorno nei laboratori di biologia svizzeri vengono prodotti enormi quantità di dati, come immagini al microscopio, sequenze genetiche o test biomedici. Una piccola parte di questi dati è effettivamente utilizzata, mentre la grande maggioranza sono invece messi da parte. Che cosa succede a tutti questi dati scartati? E soprattutto, è possibile riciclarli?
Where we need to get to is where data management becomes sexy, you know?
Che un ricercatore pubblica i suoi dati, proprio i dati.
And so why not reuse what is there instead of spending more money to generate an initial data set?
Servers use electricity and sea levels are rising.
Great, thanks a lot. Tani Georgi, what do you think? What do you like about these two contributions?
I totally like both of them, and I can really relate. They're both focused on the future of science, on different aspects. And I think Chloe really talks to the next generation of scientists. And I have one thing that really is special, maybe of how I can relate, and that's because I decided I want to study molecular biotechnology when I was 13 because I saw a talk from a Nobel Prize winner myself, and that's Christiane Nusslein-Vollhardt, whose cookbook I now have with a signature of her that I got during my PhD. And I was so nervous when I asked her for the autograph, like a teenager. I had to go home afterwards. I couldn't pipette anymore. And with Simone's contribution, I mean, I also collected terabytes of data during my PhD. And it was a huge effort to publish it in a way that's accessible. And I spent a lot of time annotating and explaining everything that I did, because I was also always conscious about what stays when I'm gone and how can we make it sustainable. So they're amazing contributions, and I'm not gonna say whom I would choose.
Thanks a lot. Stefanie Schniedrig, what's your opinion?
So yeah, I also think both contributions are really great. For Simone's idea, I think that's a really great idea. I never heard about something like that, to do new stories on old data kind of. And I think that's really also an immersion topic, since scientists always collect more and more and more data, which costs money, but then only a few of them flow into publications. And I think it's really a cool idea to reuse the data, to recycle them and make something new out of them. So yeah, it's really cool, I think. And yeah, and then Chloe's idea, that's also really nice. I also like the whole setup of how she's doing it, like with the studio and then with her dress as well, with the music, with graphics and everything. And of course, she has a great scientist, astrophysicist, who are her guests. And that's really nice, because when the expert talk directly, it's always nice to listen to them, because they have their passion and you feel that passion if they talk. So that's really nice to talk directly to them and not just to tell the story by herself.
Thanks a lot. And then I have to insist on the fact that really technically both contributions are perfect, and the slight lag we witnessed is due to the Zoom and not to their work. So we will also give our public to give their opinion. That's why we prepared a survey, which will be shared by Caroline. You will also be able to tell us which forms of communication there are, where we can reach society in Switzerland. And then especially we want also to know how to reach the young generation. This is the second question. And then if we scroll down, we see also that we need, or we would like to have your opinion to know to whom you would give your final vote for the online voting. I have to insist that this is not a representative opportunity, and the votes which are collected during the survey are not directly put into the official survey. So if you really want to vote, you have to go to the Premedia website to vote there. Lucy will share the address as well. But we love to interact with our public, and we will have a look at the result in the last third of our broadcast.
And just short information on the voting page, you can also find the 2 videos. So they are also there.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Lucy is my organizer and co-moderator. I'm really glad that you come in to tell us the details. Thanks. So let's talk about the question why we need new formats and forms for science communication. And maybe we could start with funny. Why do we need new forms and formats for young generations?
So, I mean, just like science evolves and the way we do science and the methods, so does journalism and how people communicate and where they get their information from. So earlier on, it was newspapers, then there was the TV, now it's social media. So if we want to get in touch with the people who finance research, then we have to be where they are. So we have to evolve just as well.
Stephanie Schniedrig, at Keystone SDA, are you conscious of this development, and how do you react?
Yeah, so we don't publish by ourselves directly. So we don't really go to stories for social media, especially, or something like that. But we also we try to do, whenever possible, the science news, at least in also with video and photos, so that we have also something to for the eye, for visual. Yeah, but I think not only Keystone SDA, but for all newspapers or all media houses, it's really important to know that young people don't really read newspapers anymore so often. I saw a study of ZHW and Swisscom. So there it was stated that I guess 25% of young people still read newspapers online, but that's not so much. But most of the young, they are on social media, and I think it's really important not only to make good content, but also to go with that content to the young, so that they don't have to get it, but that we bring them the content. So, and then it also has to change the form, and I guess it has to be shorter, and it has to be more visual. And yeah, I think then we can reach the young as well, because science is interesting for all, not only for older people, I guess. So there's a big potential if we adapt to this. Yeah.
Simone Pengue, you as a young scientist and movie maker, what is your impression? What new formats do we need?
Well, I basically agree with Stephanie. There is this the problem of, if you want to reach a young generation, the problem is that the attention span is extremely limited. It's actually impressive if you look at the YouTube analytics when you publish a video to see how quickly the views drop when the thing that you put on is constant for, I don't know, 5 seconds. People switch it off immediately. They're not really patient. So it's not just a matter of bringing, in a sense, the food to the people to feed them, but actually to make it easily accessible. So you basically just make out of science just chips so that they can grab and eat without spending time cutting it. Basically, that's what I would say.
Chloe, what are your reflections on new forms and formats?
I totally agree with Simone and Fanny and Stephanie. We're called the zapping generation, right? We zap all the time when we get bored. And for me, I think it's a matter of where is the information, but also how it's communicated. We know, for instance, that younger generations, they're more and more influenced by people on social media. They call influencers, and they transmit information that is listened to by their sub-followers. So I think we also come to a period where we need to think about who gives the information. This part of a role model kind of for so that the younger generation will listen to this person, for instance.
Great, thanks a lot. Are there new public for science communication? Simone Pengue, what do you think? Did we not reach everybody yet in Switzerland?
No, I really think there is a huge potential to reach much more people in Switzerland. Because Switzerland in the last years, let's say 20/20, is undergoing a new type of, let's call it immigration, from many young, highly educated people that come here to work in our academies or in our high-tech industries. Here I'm in Basel, I think about Novartis, I think about Roche. In Zurich, we can think about Microsoft, Google. All the people working there, they are often non-Swiss, they are often highly educated, but are also just English speakers. And if you do not produce anything in English, we will never be able to reach these people. And these people, they spend a lot of time on Netflix, on YouTube, watching maybe other documentaries. So if they are watching English documentaries or American documentaries about everything, including science, I don't see why they could not watch Swiss documentaries, both when they are here and also when they are in their own country, let's say. I think we should really start thinking about exporting Swiss science culture.
So your dream would be to produce movies on science as BBC or Netflix do, but the center would be Switzerland.
Yeah, of course, because here we have amazing university. The rankings of our university speak by themselves, the level of our publication, the amount of international students. If I think about my research group, we are 12 people and there's just one Swiss person. All the others, they know probably the institute because they are very much involved into biology, but it would be great to actually work more on the image of science research, of science university outside of Switzerland. There's a huge potential. And that's why I think there is a lot of space for people like me and Chloe, because that's what we can do.
So let's hear what Chloe thinks about Publix.
No, I agree definitely with Simone that Switzerland has a huge potential, and I think it's developing quite a lot within universities, and this will also for, as we saw with Simone and myself, but even at TPFL, I mean, so many students were interested in doing science communication, and I think what we're talking about Netflix and those documentaries is that there is still this gap, right, between America and Europe, where they know how to make it attractive and how to attract new audiences. And with more innovative formats now in Switzerland, we're starting to catch up, and I think it's actually an exciting time for science communication.
So you told me when we met to prepare this podium that you were at SwissNet San Francisco in Silicon Valley. Why did you go to San Francisco?
Yes, I was. I was actually selected for a fellowship called Science Pier 17 Science Studio. So I was there to develop new means of science communication. I actually developed an escape game. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's those real life thrilling games where you're in a room and you try to escape.
Like
and I developed a concept.
Like
kind of adventure room. Like you have an hour to solve puzzles and to get out. And I actually created an escape game based on scientific facts so that people that would be doing this escape game can actually learn real things. And this came from my own experience. I was doing many escape games with my family and on the topic of space. And what I was doing then was, but that will never happen in real life. This is so unrealistic. Why not use realistic stories so that when people have fun, then they can actually learn things as well?
Thanks a lot. Fanny Georgi, are there new Publix for science communication? What do you think?
I think, and that's actually like people of all ages. I don't know if many of you, I hope so, have heard of citizen science. And that's where you actually get help from non-scientists. And that's still up to debate when you are a scientist and when not, for doing research. And that's on an international scale happening for protein foldings, but it's also at the universities in Switzerland where, you know, everyone can come and contribute to projects. And I think that's a fantastic opportunity to engage the broad public.
Yes, thank you very much for talking us about citizen science. Maybe my team can put the link from Schweiz forscht. Science et Cité, a member of the Swiss Academies, is in charge of strengthening citizen science in Switzerland, and they made a selection of all the initiatives in citizen science in Switzerland. So if you want to join a group of citizen scientists, you can have a look at the project on Schweiz forscht. And there is also a website in French. I just don't remember the name, but it's not a literal translation, but it's quite idiomatic. You will see. Then let's talk to Stefanie Schniedrig. For you, are the new Publix for science communication? Who are they?
Yeah, maybe as you mentioned, the citizen science, because I once covered the story of one citizen science project, which is, I guess, really famous. It's about burying like underpants in the soil, and I was there, and there were so many participants and families and children, and I don't think that they really all of them related a lot of science, but when they read about this project to do the underpants into the soil, they were really excited and took part in a science project. So I think that's a really a nice thing to reach more people for science. And then I think we have a lot of potential to spread science more, because as I said, it's interesting, and we just have to change maybe the format, so to speak in an easier language, that not people think, oh no, I have to be at a university that I can understand it, but just to talk in an easier language. And then I think what's really good today is that anybody who has an idea to reach a new public can do that now. We don't need the media houses anymore. So anybody can upload a YouTube video and to spread the word of science, as for example, my lab in Germany did, a young scientist and science journalist. And she has a lot of success with her YouTube channel, which is about science. So I think that's really cool that anybody can publish now, can be its own publisher.
Fanny, you talked to me also about my lab. What is special about my lab?
That's like the science journalist superstar, and I wish I was her, but with less emojis. So I'm old-fashioned there. She's a chemist, a German chemist, and she started up with a YouTube channel and explained science and we're talking a young generation, so I think her audience is like teenagers, and it's totally entertaining and educating, and she won numerous awards in Germany, now has in the national television her own show, so I'm a huge fan of her. Her show is called My Lab, and still on YouTube.
Thanks a lot. Maybe my team finds the link and can put it in the chat. Let's talk about why the interaction between science and society is so important. We talked about it last week, but let's also talk in this round. Stefanie Schniedrig, why do you think is it important that science is communicated with the public?
I think it's important that people just not only know what the science results are, but also that they understand the process of science. I think that's really important, because we saw it during the coronavirus pandemics. So people were maybe a little bit confused when experts changed their views, or when there were new results coming up. So everything changed again. So then they were confused and thought, scientists, they don't know what they do, so I don't have to listen to them anymore. But I think that's really important that through science journalism, that we show how this process works, and that it's normal that theories are changed or adapted or whatever, and that scientists don't have always the same thinking about something, so that they also have to fight about what's now the right answer. And I think to understand this process, that would help that people make better decisions.
Fanny Georgi, would you like to add something on this question, on the importance of science communication for society?
Well, as a virologist, in what I study in my PhD, I can definitely confirm what Stephanie said. Just the nature of science and the scientific process is important to explain. But why is it important that the broader public and everyone understands what is developed? To me, that's two reasons. The first is obviously that the public finances research at most parts. So they have the right to know where their money goes and to have, to some extent, also the ability to influence it. But in the end, as scientists, and I studied, or I was looking for new drugs to treat viral infections, is you're doing this to be used by the public. So you require for this to happen the acceptance and the understanding. I mean, anecdotally, I think people were afraid to let women on trains because they thought their uterus might pop out of their bodies at that speed. So there's always a bit of skepticism when there are new technologies, and the job of a science journalist is to explain this, because scientists are not necessarily good at this. They're trained to sound super knowledgeable and even impossible to understand at conferences. And this is the job for a science journalist, to translate this, exactly as it was said already before.
Chloe Carrier, how do you make this work of translation? How does it work?
And I just want to say I really agree with what Stephanie and then Fanny said. The understand the processes, and this is also how we will try to limit all that is linked to conspiracies. So as a space enthusiast, I'm always asked, like, did we really go to the moon, for instance? Or we've had also lots of conspiracies for COVID. And I think that is one way to understand, is to understand the scientific process behind. And as Fanny said, also understanding why we do the science. I've a lot of people asking me, well, we have so many issues here on Earth. Why should we put some money to go to space and to develop, for instance, the lunar village? And this is because the public doesn't know that actually lots of things that are developed for space is used here on Earth. If I'm talking about your coffee machines or the milk that your babies drink, this comes from space research. And this is something that we're lacking, and that we need to communicate more so that the society can understand the benefits of science on Earth and in space.
Great, thanks a lot. Simone Pengue, what do you think about the outreach to society and the importance of it?
Yeah, so in terms of the importance of it, well, of course, Fanny, Stephanie, and Chloe said many true and things that I of course share, very pragmatic. But I think it's also important to insist on what I would call scientific culture instead of scientific education, meaning that a lot of the science communication in the last decades went in the direction of, okay, let's inform people about the process. I don't know, today I would say about a vaccine works. Okay, this is interesting, but then there's also all this way of thinking of science that relates to some question that everyone wonders, everyone asks to himself sooner or later in his life, also somehow, let's say, philosophical question. Once I was talking with Giovanni Pellegri from L'Idatorio in Ticino, is part of Science Society, and he was making me this example of, for example, stars, space research, as Chloe just mentioned, which I think is a very good example for what I mean. Yes, we can explain people how a star works, how it burns hydrogen to make helium and so on to actually shine and irradiate light. Good, but also there is all this idea of the origin of life. Where do life come from? Where does matter come from? How come that we are made of carbon? And if you read up the science, we still say that comes from stars, comes from, well, the Big Bang, the supernova, and so on. They all created all the matter that we are surrounded of. And then somehow managed to connect this idea with the explanation that people was giving 10,000 years ago. It's still the same in a sense. So it's always interesting to me as a science communicator trying to make this connection between something that apparently has nothing to do with science, with actual science that nowadays we do. And this is one part. The other part of the importance and also the risk of science communication is how sharp our tools are. Let's make another example. Nowadays, we talk a lot about food that might correlate with cancer, for example, that might cause cancer, prevent cancer. And there is a strong difference in the way that we actually share the news. I can say that something, I don't know, coffee, for example, doubles your probability, your chances of getting cancer. But then if you look at the number, maybe it's from 0.0001 to 0.0002. So was that fair, saying that it doubles the probability? Yeah, it wasn't false, but it's not a completely correct way of posing the news. And that's why I think that we should be, as science communicators, very well trained and very careful.
Are you trained, Simone? Did you have some training, or are you a complete autodidact?
I would say quite autodidact. I had some training on science storytelling in documentaries. Actually, it was a workshop organized by the Academy. It was a Locarno Film Festival, then moved to Zurich Film Festival. But in general, when I write for some newspaper or newsletter and so on, that I learned a bit by myself. Yeah.
And you, Chloe?
Yeah, kind of the same as Simone. I started as an autodidact, and then I joined a few competitions like FameLab, and so I did many workshops, and by practicing evolved. But I just wanted to react, if I may, to what Simone said about the fact that we need to be well trained, and actually that resonates what Fanny was saying. The fact that not all scientists can communicate efficiently science. It's the role of journalists. And as a scientist, and I guess the same for Simone, I don't have any training within my school program on how to communicate what I do, how to communicate science efficiently. So that's something that is interesting, and also asks the question, do you need to be a scientist to communicate science or not?
Wonderful. You just talked to us about FameLab. I just will post in the chat because Sylvie Cooperos just wrote to us that we should tune in on September 17 and have a look at FameLab and be inspired. So we just tell you to participate and have a look. I was myself in the jury of the semi-final, and I was really, it's so amazing what young people can do. Fanny Georgi, were you trained in science communication during your career as an academic?
I took a lot of courses during my studies. I could not say for sure if I had training in science communication. But I like talking, and I like talking about science, so maybe that counts as training. And I also like to talk about science with people from all different ages and education levels. I think that's the most important.
Yes, of course. And how was it for you, Stefanie Schniedrich? You studied German and geophysics, physics, and now you're a science journalism. How did this happen?
I only studied geophysics without German. Okay. Earth sciences and then geophysics, yeah. But,
yes.
Yeah, so I studied at DTH, but I never was active in research. I directly after my studies, I did an internship at VSL. So I was in science communication in the beginning. And then afterwards, I did a course in science journalism at the MATS in Lucerne. I also did an internship in science journalism, and then, yeah, finally, for 1 year now, I'm at Kisnestier. Yeah.
Wonderful. So, active decision to do some outreach instead of research. That's a wonderful story.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Lucy, can I ask you, do we have questions in the chat from our public?
No, we don't have questions.
We don't have questions for the moment. Maybe some questions will arrive if our public would like to know special points we are discussing. But I can ask Caroline whether she wants to show us the results of our survey. Okay, traditionally, the society, everybody thinks who is present today, non-representative, is newspaper and TV up front, followed by videos, podcasts, and online media platform is even ahead of videos. And the online dialogue, what you're doing today now, has only 5%. Whereas now I see social media is up front as well. And still almost 50% thinks that people would like to meet face to face. What Sciences et Cité is doing this week in Bern, at the end of the week, Friday and Saturday, they will be present with Rendezvous Waisenhausplatz in Bern together with REACH and other research organizations from the Bernese region. And we asked the same thing about the young generation, and we really see social media is almost 100%. It's 95% social media where you think they get their information, followed by online media platform and videos, and only 5% newspapers. So we really have to rethink some aspects of communication if our public is right with this prognostic. And there is a head-to-head competition of this non-representative public, with 37% for Chloé Carrière and 63% of Simone Pengue. Let's see how it turns out for right, because we know that Chloé Carrière has a rich fan community who is maybe not present today. So it's still a head-to-head competition which continues. And Lucy, until when is our public able to vote?
The voting is until the 5th September.
Okay, and then we will know who the winner is on the 5th September, and we have the prize ceremony at the ScienceCom on September 16. The ScienceCom is 2 days this year, on September 15 and 16 at the University of Fribourg. This is a wonderful place where we can meet, and the topic today is really current. We will speak about the pandemic and the times of crisis and the role of science communication and outreach. So we are quite in line for this event and with these wonderful contributions. What is your personal, are there role models in other countries? We talked about MyLab. Fanny Georgi, are there other communicators in other countries which you like a lot?
There are tons, and I'm a bit careful to say more names because I couldn't think of all of them right now. In Denmark, I'm a huge fan of podcasts because I commute a lot, and just listening to well-explained science on the train is, for me, a great solution. So a number of journals have their podcasts. There's also podcasts, for instance, from single universities, or let's say one REACH has a podcast. And I really like it because I learned something while on the train.
Okay, so we have other living conditions and we want to listen to something on the train. I myself listen a lot to radio when I had small children and I had extensive piles of laundry to fold. And I was always up to the news because of that. Stefanie Schniedrich, do you know role models of new forms of communications? Of foreign countries, maybe? Are you looking sometimes to US or UK? Or?
So as we already said, my lab, I think she's really an inspiration to try out something new and that it works as well. So, and I also like very much podcasts. I like the podcast of, I guess it's from Quarks as well. It's called Science Cops. I don't know whether you know it, but it's really nice. Two guys, they take some fake news or some strange things that were spread through social media. For example, what about 5G, or what about the mask? Do masks make children sick and stuff? And they really explain the science behind it and what we really know and what we don't know yet, and what we should believe then. So I think that's a really nice format, a new format as well. I think the Science Cops.
So something to discover. I didn't have a look at Science Cops, but it sounds interesting.
It's really, it's funny as well. Mm-hmm.
What are your role models, Chloe?
In terms of science communication, I must admit that I don't really listen to podcasts or watch any other YouTube channels like on a regular basis. It's more to get inspired and see what people are doing. In space, there is an American science communicator called the Space Gal, and she works more with children. But I really enjoy seeing how she can popularize science to such a young audience.
And I also follow the astronauts on Instagram. It's really interesting to see how they share a meal at the space station. Simone Pengue, what are your role models?
Well, I would say three names. One is an Italian YouTuber. It's called Stefano Vendrami. He talks about nutrition, and it goes a bit against what I said at the beginning because it's very educational in terms of giving you a scientific content. But what I like about him is that he really is very clear, very explicit on the limits of science. What does it mean that some food is good or is healthy, not healthy, in which quantities, what does it happen if you don't eat it? How sure are we about our knowledge? So this is an aspect of science culture that is very well communicated by him. The second is actually an example I would like to bring. He's not really a science communicator, but he's somehow communicating science in a very fun way, who is Jeremy Clarkson. He's a very famous BBC host. He's famous for this car show called Top Gear. And now I'm bringing his example because he's now doing this show on Amazon. It's called Clarkson Farm. It's basically with his own style, is trying to build up a farm without having any knowledge of how to do a farm. He really does not know it, and he's just saying his own story and the problem that he is facing. And in this way, you are so involved and you learn so much about something that is also scientific, which is farming. And I think that we should follow the same style. I have a problem. I want to do this. I don't know anything. How do I do it? Just follow me and you will get to learn. And this is the second example. The third is actually a Swiss person who's also not doing science communication. He's actually doing theater. He's very famous. It's called Daniele Finzi-Pasca. Maybe you know him. He's a theater director. He's also directed the opening show of the Fête de Vigneron in 2019, I think. He's opening some Olympics, the Olympics opening show. I mean, he's a very famous theater director in Switzerland. And the thing is that he's from Ticino. And the reason why he became so famous is because he had a limitation. And this limitation is the same limitation that I have, which is the language. He wanted to communicate his theater, his emotions to the rest of Switzerland, but he couldn't do it through the language. So he completely removed the language, almost completely removed the language from his show. And I think that this weakness of Switzerland of not being able to smoothly communicate internally should be turned into a strength, I would say. And this is what he did. This is what I would like to do. I have this problem. I'm just copying his example to communicate science to the rest of Switzerland and for the rest of the world.
Thank you very much for sharing. So it's about storytelling, about being a person really close to the public. And we have in our public a question. Lucy, would you like to share this question with us?
Yes, it's a question with a follow-up question. Someone asks if you think that journalists sometimes cause misunderstandings because they don't know science well enough. And the other question is if a bachelor's degree is enough to do science journalism and communication.
Yeah, so we start with the bachelor degree and ask Stefanie Schniedrig, is it enough to communicate?
So from the science journalists in Switzerland, I know most of them do have a PhD, so they are really strong in their field of science. So I only have the master degree. Whether a bachelor is enough, I don't know really, but I think it's always, we as journalists, we always know less than the researchers. So we are not experts in vaccinology or whatever. So we always know less. But I think that's not a problem, since we as journalists, and that's also one reason why I chose this profession, because we can always ask questions. So we can really also ask stupid questions. So we really try to understand what's the essence of the study, of the science. And then also we don't have to understand everything about what they are really doing. We just have to really look critically at the study. So what do the statistics say? And you can do that also if you only have a bachelor or master's degree, I think. You just have to have a look really carefully on the studies and then really to talk to experts. So I think it doesn't really matter whether you have a PhD or even more experience in science, but you can do science journalism, either way.
Funny, Georgi, what do you think? What did you learn as a biologist when you did the master's degree or the PhD? Is it about research systematics, or can you know this already before or just after the bachelor?
I think what my PhD has taught me is to not give up, to live through failures, to be stubborn and get to the bottom of things, and that over multiple years. But I don't think that that's necessarily something that you need to be a good science journalist. If you would need to have a degree in every field that you cover as science journalist, that would take a life at university. And then you're going to do geosciences or space and sciences and like all the things at the Faculty of Science. That's a tough one. I think what you need to know is a bit the language of science and how science works, statistics in that sense. But just, I mean, as what's the same thing the best qualities in a scientist and a journalist is the same, and that's asking questions and being curious. And that's something that you can't learn at university.
Great. Chloe, what would you say? How can scientists try to not make errors when communicating?
Wow, that's a hard question.
It's from our public.
The most important is the will to communicate. If you're a scientist and you communicate because someone told you to do so, well, it's not going to work out. You need to be motivated to transmit what you know. And as Fanny said, also the curiosity. Usually when I talk to scientists who are not interested in science communication, I try to tell them to take it as a challenge. There's this quote that says the ultimate sophistication is simplification. So it's a challenge to sometimes communicate about your field of quantum physics, but how would you explain what you do to a child? And that's challenging. And as scientists, we love challenges.
Great. Simone, what would you say?
If there is one thing that I might add to what my colleagues already said, is that I think the core is understanding the logical thinking of science. And by this, to be more explicit, I mean the difference between a correlation between events, a sufficient condition, and a necessary condition. And this is often where non-scientists are wrong. Often, not always, of course. And I think this is also a problem in the public debate about scientific aspect. Let's talk about vaccines. There is a big correlation between being vaccinated and not getting COVID. It's not a necessary condition. I can be not vaccinated and not get any COVID, but also it's not a sufficient condition. I can be vaccinated and get COVID. It's not statistically impossible because there is always this idea of, limit of science. Science, the language of science at the end is statistics, in a sense. And I think that journalists have to be aware of it. They don't need to master statistics. They just need to be aware of it.
Thanks a lot. Yes, statistics is important, and it's important that the public understands what figures mean. We have a last question. I don't think that we can discuss it, but thank you for sharing with us, Monica Corrado. Monica Corrado is at the Cité Université in Paris, and she asked us, would you say that political agency like Presence Switzerland can contribute to making science communication known abroad? And this is really a big question, and I hope Presence Switzerland will react on formats like Chloe's and Simone's, because I think Switzerland has a lot to give, and maybe we should be officially in contact with Presence Schweiz to really promote this idea. You were such a great panel. Thank you so much, and so great finalists. I hope everybody will spread the word and we will get a lot of votes. I hope to see you both on the celebration. I know that's just one winner possible, but you are both winner already as a finalist. And thank you for our public who joined us again within not even a week, again on the topic of science communication. It's important, and it was important to discuss this from the young perspective. And thank you for my team, which is in a technical background and makes it possible to share with you. Bye-bye, and have a nice afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.